So again, I thank you all for coming. And I'd like to introduce the president of the board of the Boothbay Region Health Center, which is the parent of our brain health program, Dr. Paul Taylor. Would you please join me, Paul?
Hi, can you all hear me? Okay. I'm a retired family physician, and I get bored sitting around, so I decided I'd help out with the health clinic. And I wanted to spend a few minutes just telling you about some of our recent efforts at the health clinic and the direction we're trying to take it in, and some of the reasons why we would do that. And I want to start off with a simple thought, and that is that health is a personal thing. It's personal. It's not enveloped in the bureaucracies of healthcare these days. It involves our body functions, or how our bodies function, how our minds function, how our emotions are directed. Our health is also influenced by many things that go beyond a typical medical office. Our social support systems, our mobility, our financial stability, our access to nutritional food, and our ability to obtain health care when we need it. Unfortunately, healthcare today is fragmented, difficult to access, and expensive. And I'm sure many of you have encountered that process. The challenge is particularly concerning to the community such as ours, where it's increasingly more difficult to find primary care providers, and the cost of providing high quality primary care just keeps going up and up and up. Yet our healthcare is personal. That's why the Boothbay Region Health Center actually exists, to try to counterbalance some of these issues that are surrounding us. Our goal is to keep healthcare personalized, accessible, affordable, proactive, and locally controlled. Our board over this last year has worked hard to establish these values such that they guide how we think and what we're trying to introduce into the health center, and how it affects the patients it serves. We want to provide patient-focused primary care. We want to be accessible to the people of our community. We want to remain financially stable while keeping care affordable. And importantly, we want to listen to our patients and improve the quality of care and communication that we provide. And I don't need to tell you that trying to accomplish all that is pretty hard. And yet we're trying. Unlike many primary care practices, the health center doesn't have a hospital or a large healthcare system to support the various primary care practices when the operating costs routinely exceed the usual kind of reimbursement for primary care. So in our health center, about 25% of our operating costs is funded by the generosity of the community. And that's quite unique compared to many places. Despite some of these significant challenges of the last winter, today I can say that I'm very pleased to say that the health center now has an experienced nurse practitioner, Dory Ware, along with the help of Teel, giving some part-time services. And if there wouldn't mind, I don't know where Chip is right at the moment. Dory, would you just stand up so people recognize you? So we've been working on a number of initiatives to facilitate better function in the office and create some resiliency to the health clinic such that it's sustainable. We've improved our employee benefits, refurbished our website, we've increased our efforts to literally make the health center better known in the community, and we've introduced an AI-based record-keeping system that has significantly reduced the administrative burden on the providers. And I can't tell you how much of a change that makes in their life. We are in the early contemplative stages of acquiring another nurse practitioner to enhance our access and again, make the clinic more sustainable. We're beginning our annual community appeal because of maintaining a community-supported health center requires the continued involvement of the community and the support from that. But tonight is not really about our challenges in the health center. It's more importantly an opportunity to think about how we think differently about our health and health in general. One of the principles we're trying to emphasize at the health center is the importance of being proactive rather than simply reactive. Not waiting until disease becomes advanced before we address it, but looking for ways to preserve health and to function and keep our functions at a high level. That brings us really to tonight's program and the topic at hand. Although primary mission of the health center is to provide excellent primary care, it also has a mandate to support programs that enhance the health and well-being of the community. And brain health is an excellent example of that philosophy. Tonight, we are fortunate to learn about brain health with the efforts of Teel and Patricia Seybold. The program focuses on maintaining cognitive health and slowing deterioration of function, particularly for people experiencing symptoms associated with dementia. I think it's especially important subject in this community. Most of you have a friend, family member, or neighbor who has had some elements of cognitive decline. And the difference with all this now is that the possibility of doing something proactively rather than simply accepting cognitive deterioration as an inevitable part of aging. It's a new and worthy idea to expand on. So I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight and for supporting brain health and the health center. And I'm sure that it'll be very informative and you'll learn a lot. I just want to end my comment with a tagline that the health center has derived over the last few months. And it sort of centers back on some of the things I said, the way healthcare should be. And we are trying to reverse a trend that seems to sometimes go the other way. And with that, I'll turn things over to Patty and Chip.
Thank you very much, Paul. I have to tell you that as a newly returned member of the board of the health center, I am so grateful to Paul for being our president. He is very proactive, very organized, and very committed. So we are extremely lucky to have him. So first, I want to just tell you a story about how the brain health program started. My dad had severe Alzheimer's starting at the age of 76. I found his journal about 10 years ago in which he wrote at the age of 76, "I think I'm losing my mind." And like many people with Alzheimer's, my father had been an incredibly successful businessman and entrepreneur and consultant. In fact, he invented the foundation coding for the World Wide Web, among other things. And he was a pioneer in electronic publishing. And he spent the last 10 years of his life in a lockdown unit so that he couldn't escape because of his Alzheimer's, and he was miserable. So as I came into my 70s, I made it clear to lots of people who knew me that I was worried about ending up with this genetic disease. And one of the people I talked to, of course, was my doctor, Dr. Teel. And a friend gave me a book called The End of Alzheimer's by Dr. Dale Bredesen. Very thick, kind of academic tome. And I slogged my way through it, and I thought, oh, this is completely different than what I thought. And I gave it to Dr. Teel on a Friday. He called me the following Sunday and said, I think this is really interesting. He said, I've been dealing with patients with dementia and Alzheimer's my entire career, and this is the first thing I've seen that makes sense. So together we decided to give it a try. And we put together a group in January 2020. Do you remember what happened in early 2020? Right. So when COVID hit, we went from our little group of 20, many of whom are in this room. We went from meeting together in conference room at the community center to jumping on Zoom. So we might have been the first set of senior citizen early adopters of Zoom. I don't know, but we were right there. And that group has grown, and I'll show you the statistics in a minute, but first I want to give you the key takeaways that I hope you'll walk away with. The most important one, the one I learned from that book, is that Alzheimer's is not a death sentence, even if you inherit one or two Alzheimer's genes, and I inherited one. You can, in fact, mitigate the disease because there are over 40 different causes of dementia and Alzheimer's. And they are things, most of them are things you can control. So what our program does is it tests you to see which of these things you have in your body, and then it gets rid of as many of them as it can. So in my case, I tested really high for aluminum. I don't have aluminum in my water. I don't cook with aluminum cookware, but maybe my mom did when I was a kid. So one of the things that I've done over the last 4 years is I drink a particular kind of bottled water, Fiji water, that is very high in silica, and it bonds with the aluminum in my system, and I pee it out. Well, the result of my lab test is I am now normal for aluminum. So that dementigen has been taken away. So that's just one simple example. Every single person in our program has anywhere from 4 to 10 or 12 of these known dementigens that we have discovered, and each of us is working on getting rid of them. So that's the good news and the thing that I really want you to take away. The second one is that even if you don't do our program, even if you're not at genetic risk, you don't have any symptoms, you aren't worried about your brain health, if you adopt a brain healthy lifestyle, you are much less likely to have cognitive decline. So one of the handouts we gave you, and I'll go over it briefly at the end, is all the 10 to 12 things that we do every day to keep ourselves brain healthy. And I have to admit, it's a lot of work. Most of us probably spend a couple of hours a day doing things we didn't used to do, but we feel better and our brains are less foggy. And we notice when brain fog starts to roll in, or we have trouble remembering people's names or identifying somebody, recognizing somebody we meet in the grocery store or at the dump, we think back to what did you do in the last 24 hours? Did you sleep well? Did you drink a glass of wine? Did you eat sugar? Did you do something different within the last 24 hours that is causing that symptom today? And most of us have gotten pretty good at figuring out what the correlations are. Some of us can drink wine, some of us can't. It's all extremely personal. So the second point I don't want to gloss over, which is we don't think there's anybody else in the world doing a program like this one. And you'll see as we walk through our, what we now call the Boothbay Brain Health Protocol, that what makes it unique is kind of the composition of it, all the pieces that we've woven together, and the fact that we've been at it for 6 years. So we keep evolving it. It's continually organically evolving. And all of the patients are involved. So yes, we're accepting new patients. We have a rolling enrollment. And the only criteria is your insurance needs to be able to pay for a Maine licensed doctor. So if you have out-of-state insurance, you need to double check that. And as Dr. Taylor said, both the Brain Health Program and the Boothbay Region Health Center are supported primarily not by the fees we pay for our healthcare through our insurance companies or out of pocket, but that only covers about 50% of our costs. So the other 50% is basically contributions made by members of the Brain Health Group and donations and contributions and grants from members of the community. And we're lucky that there are a number of wonderful family foundations here in the Boothbay region that have been very generous in their support, and we hope we'll find more generous donors. So let me give you kind of an update. As I said, we started with 20 people, and we're now at 143 active patients, and 17 of them have very active care partners who are also members of the group. They are on the email program, they come to the meetings, they're very active in cooking and making sure that their partner has the support they need. And we're going to keep growing. I think the only real gating factor is Dr. Teel's time. But he's been getting more and more efficient now, as Paul mentioned, that he can use artificial intelligence to help him with his notes. As he reported to me the other day, it's gone from 7 hours on Saturdays to about 45 minutes to go through his notes and clean them up. So that's a huge time saving. So we're going to fill that time up with patients probably. So who are we? You can see the age range. I'm hoping a year from now, when I show you this slide, we will have more people in their 40s, because what's happening is that people in their 40s and 50s realize that they may have genetic risk when they realize that their parents or their aunts or their uncles or their grandparents had cognitive issues, and they start reading the research and they realize, oh, wait a minute, I should start doing something about this now. And so that's why we have people in their 40s. They're not necessarily suffering from cognitive decline. They want to do it preventatively, which is wonderful. But you can see the majority of us are in that 70 to 79, 80, 89, and we have several of us still over 90. And of course, we have lost some. So let me just have one of our patients give you her.
My name is Beth Langton. I joined the Brain Health Group at the Boothbay Region Health Center just over 2 years ago. I was having problems with word recall. My mother had had the same problem starting at the same age I was. I was 72, and my mother had died at 78, so I was very concerned about this. I had asked my PCP about it. His response shocked me. He replied, "There's no drug for that. The only thing I care about is who to call when you can no longer take care of yourself." I knew there was no drug, but I was expecting some kind of discussion about what I could do about it. There was no discussion. I felt hopeless, but when I joined the brain health group, my outlook completely changed for the better. The first thing I asked Dr. Teel to do was to look at my DNA. I was afraid that my mother had had Alzheimer's, so I was very relieved to hear that I did not have the Alzheimer's gene. I learned from Dr. Teel that there are many factors that can affect cognition, and it's not all genetics. Brain health is affected by diet, physical exercise, sleep, exposure to pollutants, social life, just to name a few. So with the support of Dr. Teel and members of the Brain Health Group, I have made a lot of changes in my life. I completely abandoned the standard American diet, and I'm following a whole food, plant-based diet with no processed food or sugar. My weight, my A1C, my CRP, and my LDL all dropped to optimal levels. My Barrett's esophagus and acid reflux disappeared. I got a smartwatch to measure my steps and then doubled the amount of exercise that I do, including strength training, balance, and aerobics. My smartwatch showed that I was not getting enough sleep. The more I learned about sleep, I realized that my mother's snoring was actually severe sleep apnea. And after a sleep test, I discovered that I had sleep apnea too. So now I sleep soundly using a CPAP machine. My word recall problem is mostly gone. When it reoccurs, I double down on my lifestyle program and it goes away. I don't know where I would be without this brain health group. I am sharing what I've learned with my children, my siblings, and anyone who will listen. The brain health program has been a complete game changer for me.
There are three things that I'm calling secret sauce in our brain health protocol. This is the first one. Dr. Teel will describe the other two because they're clinical in nature. But the first one is our patient community. So not only do we all see Dr. Teel, but we all meet together every month with Dr. Teel. And he gives us a seminar, a 2-hour seminar on the latest research in brain health. And he bases the topics of his research on his findings of seeing patients that month. So whatever pattern he begins to see among those patients inform the research that he does, which he then shares with us. And independently, we each do our own research on all the issues that he discovers are related to us. And we share that information, like in my case, the aluminum example I gave you, shared with everybody else in the community. We have our own private email list. We also have video recordings of every seminar he's done since January 2020. We have written notes from all of those seminars. We have all the research papers, all of that collated and organized by volunteers who are members of our group. And one of the things Dr. Teel wrote about in one of his early books was if you harnessed the brain power of all the seniors in any community, you would have an incredible intellectual asset. And that's essentially what we're doing. So we're very proud of that part of our program. So I'm going to ask Dr. Teel to come up and tell you a bit more about our results to date. The rest of the protocol.
Thank you, Patty. The major, not so secret ingredient of our success you just heard from. Without Patty, we wouldn't be here. She has really kept this organization together. She's made this happen. I show up every month and we talk about a lot of things, but we're incredibly lucky to have Patty guiding the show for us. So there are an awful lot of things to talk about. You know, the first order of business is, why should we do this at all? You know, and really, as you can read almost anywhere now, the demographics, the economics of this particular problem are massive. You know, that we are finding that there are probably going to be 6 million Americans right now dealing with diagnosed Alzheimer's disease, to say nothing of all of us who might have some cognitive decline that could be better. The economics of that are huge. The genetics of that are important. And so this whole program, as Patty alluded to, that was outlined in Dr. Bredesen's book, was a jumping off point for us, saying, why don't we try to replicate this in our community? And I'd like to give you a couple of references to look for on your own. One is a small paperback book called The First Survivors of Alzheimer's. And that particular book by Dr. Bredesen is an easy read, and it outlines many people who have gone through challenges that they started to experience themselves, similar to their parents, and after being on the program for 6 to 12 months, had a reversal of their brain fog, and now 5, 6, 10, 15 years later, are still, quote, normal. So this stuff works. The other kind of thing to, if you're more of a visual person, is there's a movie called Memories for Life. And that movie you can find on YouTube or one of your internet searches, and it's by a Japanese filmmaker in English, so that you can find out all about this particular program. Now, as Patty alluded to, the program has produced some remarkable results. And again, most of the results that we value are whether everybody feels like they're doing better. You know, and those are the changes that you're going to see in a short period of time. Will I improve my brain imaging tests? Will I, you know, we don't do a very good job as a medical profession to understand even how to ask the questions about how is your brain? How are you doing with your brain? We have some simple screening tools, whether you can remember 3 words or 4 words or 5 words that I give you, but really, how does that impact your day-to-day life? So what we've done when we've started with everybody joining our group is to take an inventory of the kinds of things that matter to you. What do you notice in your everyday life? And that's our marching orders. Those are the things that we're trying to work on. We've been very fortunate to have a secret weapon in all of the people in our group, as Patty talked about, that they push me, I push them, and many of them are in this particular room tonight. And with their help, we've produced some really remarkable results. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Do we have an awful lot more to do? We absolutely do. Have we had some individuals that were very far advanced when they joined our program? And could we reverse that? We really couldn't. But we gave them a much longer quality of life than they would have had before. And we gave them hope and support. And as I said, stabilize their situation so that there's this term that we use called cognitive reserve. So for whatever amount of brain that you might have lost, if your cognitive reserve in certain important areas is very strong, you can ride that horse for a long period of time after that. And that's what we're all about teaching as well. This is another member of our group,
My name is Elaine Jones, and I've been a participant in the Boothbay Region Health Center's brain health program for the past 4 years. I come from a long line of Alzheimer's, and it really scares me. I became aware of the illness at a young age when my grandmother moved into our home. Not only did I have to share my bedroom with her, but I had to watch her every day after school until my mother came home from work. I saw my meme fade away. She not only forgot my name, she forgot who she was. And later, I saw my mother walk in the same heartbreaking path. Every day was filled with anxiety, fear, and confusion. And now, I live with the knowledge that I carry the ApoE4 gene. With every forgotten word or misplaced item, I used to wonder, is this it? Am I following in their footsteps? Alzheimer's may be a part of my family's story, but thanks to Dr. Teel and his associates, I now have hope. They have taught me that knowing my risk gives me the power to face my future. Weekly and monthly seminars have increased my awareness of the need for lifestyle changes, while quarterly appointments monitor my current condition and provide me with comfort and assurance that I'm not alone in this journey. The Boothbay Region Health Center's Brain Health Program is an exemplary model that can help current and future generations ward off Alzheimer's disease across Maine and possibly the nation. So together, we can fight the fight. Please join our team.
So what is this amazing health center program? You know, it is something that I don't think Patty or I in our wildest dreams thought that 6 years ago we could be where we are now. So with that kind of effort, we've been able to make a very big difference. What we offer, as our speakers presenting on the screen have told about, are lifestyle changes. These are not impossible. Are they a change? They absolutely are. And is change difficult? It absolutely is. But what I think we've seen among all of the participants who are amazingly motivated to make those changes. So as will be outlined in the book that I recommended, you don't have to do this perfectly. You just have to do it better than you are now. So that's really where it comes right down to. We all can eat healthier. We all can exercise more. We all can do things to improve our brain by having more brain exercises, really spending some time on trying to improve that muscle between our ears. Those are important things to be doing. We're going to talk about many of the diagnostic tests and things as we go forward here. We mentioned the 40 or so risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Really, one of the groundbreaking roles of Dr. Bredesen and his research lab were the hypothesis that Alzheimer's is not a single cause condition. It's part of the reason that billions of dollars and 40 or 50 years of medication trials have not produced any significant improvement in treatment of Alzheimer's disease. We've been barking up the wrong tree. Alzheimer's is really the end result of 35 or 40 or more different factors, and most of these factors are ones that can be remedied with a variety of diagnostic tests to see whether you have these things or not, and then doing what is required to prevent them or to mitigate them. Some of them have to do with glucose toxicity. Some of them have to do with vitamin and hormone deficiencies, toxins and infections, from Lyme disease to mercury to toxoplasmosis. There are an awful lot of viruses, even from this common cold sore virus, that can play a role. These are all things that we can find out about and do something about. There are also many of the typical risk factors for heart disease that you hear about: blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, and smoking history. And then there are also the things related to either emotional or physical trauma, whether it be depression and anxiety or poor sleep or concussions. So when we take an interview history with individuals that join our group, we're looking for things that are medical things and socioeconomic and environmental things that affect your brain health. That's our primary focus. Once we've done the basic tests, and this basic test list that we have, as I've just alluded to, is really quite extensive. And once we've addressed those things, we've actually found that there are a number of other testing that are not typically done that have to do with brain health. And some of them are tests that we can get through your routine labs from Quest or Nordex, but some of them we have to do from outside labs as well. We find out about things that cause brain inflammation. We do testing for brain inflammation with blood tests. And then once you have a positive blood test for a marker of inflammation, we look hard for the cause of that. And sometimes it turns out to be that there are inflammatory markers that we can find from other more extensive lab testing. These are the things that we try to focus on, all an unpronounceable bunch of alphabet soup of a whole group of antibodies that are a reaction of your own body and your own immune system to various infectious particles, inflammatory particles, or autoimmune particles that can cause, over time, some wear and tear on your brain. So the theory goes that the more ways that we can intercede early on, the bigger difference we can make. When Patty alluded to the idea of doing something for 40 and 50-year-olds, that's really the premise that allowed Dr. Bredesen to say that this could be the end of Alzheimer's. If we had people in their 40s and 50s starting to do things preventatively, we could prevent Alzheimer's disease entirely, because the theory goes that it takes 20 or 30 years of low-grade chronic inflammatory changes happening in our brain before it becomes diagnosable in our 60s, 70s, and 80s as something called Alzheimer's disease. So there is an awful lot of a lead time up to getting this, and if we could intercede earlier on, it would make a huge difference. There are also additional blood tests that give us an indication of how much active inflammatory change is going on in your body at the present time. These are, again, tests for things called interleukins and interferons. They are things that you might have heard their name in passing related to something like multiple sclerosis or MS, but they also, those same chemicals, have a bearing on inflammation in the brain. But really, the major difference that I think we have made is trying to introduce people to their brain anatomy and what their own specific brain looks like. Much of the brain function that we're started to talk about over the last 4 or 5 years is to learn the different lobes of the brain and what roles each of those parts of the brain play in everyday things that we value. One of the things that kept a lid on knowing much about this was that when we get a conventional MRI of the brain, we get a very brief report from the neuroradiologist saying age-appropriate MRI of the brain. That doesn't help us very much. They are able to say that we don't have a brain tumor and we haven't had a stroke. Those are good things. But it doesn't tell us what every single subsection of your brain is doing. The particular test that we do is called a volumetric MRI. That takes those slices of your brain and measures every nook and cranny of your brain so that we actually get 100 measurements of all of those subsections of your brain. And the reason that those are not ordered is they're rarely available. And if they were available, no one would order them because they don't understand what those subsections do. It takes an awful lot of effort to figure that out. So a few years ago, with the help of this particular group and this program, I started writing a guide to what those 100 subsections of the brain would do. And so when members of our group get this particular test, we actually have a guide to help you understand what your own personal strengths and weaknesses are. And I can't emphasize enough that this volumetric MRI is a real game changer. There are not two studies that are exactly the same, and these particular studies show a whole lot of different scars in our brain from different things in our life. It's hard to believe that I could look at an MRI of your brain and then start to ask you about various emotional trauma or prior concussions, or, oh, there's the source for your ADD, or that's why you have bipolar illness, or this is some part of your brain that is really strong and other parts of your brain that are pretty weak. We've never had the ability to do this. Now it is there, but we're just not using it very often. And once you find out these things about your brain, you can do something about it. And it's not always bad news. An awful lot of people who have come in having a few brain cramps or senior moments, and they're wondering whether this is the beginning of Alzheimer's disease for them. And I'm able to do one of these volumetric MRIs of their brain and say, hey, you're 75 years old and your brain looks wonderful. I don't think there's a chance you're going to ever have Alzheimer's disease. That's a very important thing to be able to tell somebody that I wasn't able to do 5 or 10 years ago. And then when you do find areas of concern, those are usually balanced by other strong areas that you can use to fashion workarounds. So there's an awful lot that can be done. What do these MRI reports look like? These volumetric MRIs, again, give you numerical percentiles that compare your particular brain to everybody else, your age and gender. So we have an ability to say, as in this individual's one, that their frontal lobe, where all of their executive function comes from, is in the 73rd percentile. That doesn't mean that they've lost 27% of their brain. It means they have a larger frontal lobe than 3/4 of their peers. So that's a good thing. That means they're at the top of the class. And you can kind of go through the rest of this and look at strengths and weaknesses And wherever there are some areas of weakness, you can try to see whether they are balanced out by other areas that are workarounds or that involve in a very complicated thing like the brain. There are lots of checks and balances that allow us to not be impacted by what we are noticing on our study. One of the things that this group taught me was that there were a number of folks in their 80s who actually had a very strong brain until just the last year or two. Not really the story of Alzheimer's disease. And their areas of atrophy on the top right-hand half of this page were in two very small subsections of the brain. Something with the unusual names of, or three sections, the entorhinal cortex, the parahippocampus, and the amygdala. Those areas are parts of the brain that have to do with memory. So this individual and partner were concerned that this was the beginning of a descent into Alzheimer's disease. Unbeknownst to me 5 or 6 years ago, but now something that I know enough to look for and is rarely noted by any other neurologist that I've ever talked to, and I'm not a neurologist, I'm a family doctor, but is that there is a condition with a very long name abbreviated as LATE, or late. And late stands for limbic predominant. That means that it's in my temple area. Age-related TDP 43 encephalopathy, a real mouthful. But what is very important about that is that isn't caused by the same ingredients that Alzheimer's disease is caused from. And it has a very different clinical course. It goes very, very slowly, and it doesn't affect other parts of the brain. It is really just limited to these few sections that are currently impaired now. So I can tell that 83-year-old and his wife that this is not going to get worse. Yep, you've got some memory problems because of these couple of areas that are involved, but what you see is what you get, and it's not going to change much. So therefore, you've got a lot of other very strong areas. And when I look at his frontal lobe, where his executive function comes from, which has a lot to do with his motivation to succeed and do things, he's in the 82nd percentile. That means that he has more of that part of his brain than 82% of his peers. 4 out of 5 people would be lucky to have his MRI for that part of their brain. So these things tell a story that is way more profound than what you could possibly get from a regular MRI report. And it's manageable for us to get these and then to interpret them. But this condition called LATE wasn't even known about 7 or 8 years ago. And now that it's been discovered, and now that we can actually have a test to say, hey, guess what? This isn't Alzheimer's disease. This is something else that is much slower progressing and very isolated. Those are very good things to talk about. There are a number of other easier stories to tell because they're kind of fun on what the subunit of the brain, that one of the part of the brain that might be impacted. I'm going to go back one slide to just give you a frame of reference. The anecdotes that I want to bring up from our particular group were something that caught my fancy over the last year or two, and that is that there were many individuals who came into our program for the same reasons that you've heard us talk about already. that they had a copy of an Alzheimer's gene that they'd already found out about or that they suspected because of their family history. And when I did an MRI of their brain, many of them had a really, really strong brain all the way across, but they had one ding somewhere of these 100 sections. There was just one subsection, a very obscure subsection often, but a very obscure subsection that if we looked hard enough, probably meant something. So by now having the World Wide Web at our fingertip and being able to look into the causes of an effect of each of these subsections of the brain, I got very interested in trying to connect the dots between what they described and what their MRI showed, their volumetric MRI. And it's led to some very fascinating stories that I want to share with you. There was a person who was 68 and was a retired aerospace engineer, and he had 2 copies of this ApoE4 gene and a very strong family history. And his MRI had a couple of areas that were of concern, but the biggest concern his wife brought up, saying, how can this really fine aerospace engineer have to ask me 4 or 5 times today what time our appointment is this afternoon? And I said, yep, that's happened. And I said, I'll bet it has something to do with the one area of atrophy that he had in his hippocampus, a part of the temporal lobe, deep inside the temporal lobe. So what I did was I did a little bit of research and found that there are 6 layers of cells in the hippocampus, and there is one layer of cell, the 3rd layer, called CA3, that had a few specialized cells in the middle of that subsection that are called time cells. And they have something to do with our awareness of time. So I was able to give them a logical, defensible, scientific explanation for why their pet peeve came where it came from. So now that's become kind of a game on my part, trying to say, can I connect the dots between their own particular concern and their own MRI? I had a 61-year-old retired electrical engineer who had a copy of an ApoE4 gene and a mother with Alzheimer's disease, whose major concern were, yep, I'm having some word finding difficulty. But also, he said, in the last year, I've had a lot of trouble learning new tunes on his hammered dulcimer that he played at church. Now, how am I going to find out an answer to that? But it turns out he had a very good MRI with most of his brain being in the 60th or 80th percentile. So he was better than 3/4 of his peers, but he had one very obscure, isolated area of atrophy in this place called the entorhinal cortex that was only in the 1st percentile. Everything else was okay. So I did a little research and found that the entorhinal cortex acts as a temporary scaffolding or functional bridge to encode learning a new sequence into your cohesive memory. And you have to have that piece working in order to learn new melodies on an instrument like his dulcimer. So we actually had an answer for him that made sense. And this probably came from some of the concussions he had from still being a serious lacrosse player, playing in a lot of tournaments where he got bumped in the head from time to time. Similarly, we had a 59-year-old fisherman who was intensely interested in being proactive, because he had a copy of this Alzheimer's gene and a paternal grandfather and father with Alzheimer's disease, and had some word finding difficulty, but there was a little bit of difference in his word finding difficulty. It was because he was in a bilingual household with his Brazilian wife who spoke Portuguese and their 8-year-old daughter together that spoke Portuguese. And so he likewise had a really strong brain, except for one ding in this one place called the left middle temporal gyrus. Again, something that I wouldn't have even known existed. And if you actually did an MRI of the brain, it would be read by the neuroradiologist as age-appropriate MRI of the brain, with no comment whatsoever that this section of atrophy anywhere in his brain existed. But it turns out that this left middle temporal gyrus plays a crucial role in language processing, especially in the ability to rapidly recall things like his Portuguese vocabulary and effortlessly link new foreign words to concepts he already knew. So this is what could be found out by research, and it just became a source of great fascination to me. A little more practical thing was a 62-year-old retired social worker who she came with 2 copies of this ApoE4 gene, and she was really not having really much trouble until the last Christmas and New Year's holidays. She drove to her mother's house in Massachusetts from her Portland home and really had more trouble with directions on a trip that was usually easy for her to make. Both of her total gray matter and her total white matter for her whole brain was in the 80th percentile. So she was no slouch across the board, but she had one area in her brain called the parahippocampus that was a real outlier that was only in the 7th percentile. And it turns out that this outlier is a part of the brain that plays a major direct role in your difficulty with travel and navigation. It processes environmental scenes, recognizes landmarks, and links the visual cues to her own mental map. Exactly what she had trouble with that particular day. So it has really started to become really remarkable how you can connect the dots between somebody's major concern and what this MRI of the brain shows them. One more particular story has to do with a 73-year-old retired medical lab tech who sought a brain consultation with us because she'd had a confusional spell with stuttering while she was out with friends for a dinner party. She had several other strong cognitive concerns and a family history, but her MRI showed that her total gray matter of all of her brain cells was better than 2/3 of all of her peers. But she had one area of atrophy in a little subsection on the left-hand side of this page called the caudate, and that was only in the 4th percentile. So I was able to do some research and find that that particular part of the brain disrupts the brain's timing and the internal cues for starting and stopping speech, and it impairs the motor sequencing that leads to us being able to speak fluently. So without this, the timing defects would break down the internal rhythm, and she wouldn't be able to speak clearly like she could that night. So all of these particular parts of the brain play an important role, and parts of our everyday life that you wouldn't think of until you actually start digging into it. But what's the big picture? You know, these are kind of fascinating stories, but what does it do for the other individuals in our group who came with some advanced cognitive decline? I'd like to give you a couple anecdotes of those individuals to see that you can still make a difference there. One was an 80-year-old retired chemistry professor who could no longer do single-digit addition or subtraction without using his fingers. And this individual also couldn't remember his birthday or know what day it was. After he was on this particular program of ours for about 6 to 8 months, he was playing highest level Sudoku from the New York Times online, and he was playing cribbage with his wife every night and doing all of the scoring in his head. Obviously, he wasn't good enough to still go back to teaching chemistry again, but the program made a huge difference for he and his family. Another individual was almost 90 and had been an entrepreneur throughout his life. And he was now at the point of his life where he could no longer speak, hardly ever, and couldn't dress himself without significant cueing from his wife. And at that point, by going on the program, over the next 6 to 10 months, he improved to the point that he was speaking in short sentences and able to dress himself independently and do his morning care. Those may not seem like big deals, but those are really important things if you're a family member dealing with a spouse struggling with cognitive decline. So there's an awful lot that we can do. And let me give you one more personal testimony from one of our colleagues, and then we'll...
Hello, I'm Susan Stewart, a 77-year-old retired nurse educator. I now divide my time between Boothbay Harbor and Dublin, Ohio. In 2017, my partner, Bill Dixon, was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. His primary care physician told him to eat a Mediterranean diet, exercise, and return for annual reevaluations. In the meantime, I began what turned out to be a fruitless search for some type of comprehensive preventive program. I checked several of the world-class, very large medical institutions in Ohio. Then in 2021, Bill was diagnosed with vascular dementia. His neurologist told him to eat a Mediterranean diet, exercise, and prescribed him with a medication commonly given to patients who have Alzheimer's. I kept searching for a better, more proactive program, and I was amazed to find that program in Boothbay Harbor, Maine. Our first appointment with Dr. Teel was in May of 2021. I was blown away. His knowledge about dementia and the program that he described was quite frankly astonishing. His assessment of Bill's condition was thorough. Bill's first volumetric MRI showed devastating atrophy in all areas of the brain associated with dementia. And then 2 years later, for a follow-up MRI, the results of that test showed no additional significant change or loss. Sadly, my partner of over 40 years died in 2024. Could Bill's dementia have been slowed even more if we had started the Brain Health program sooner? That will always be unknown, but it will always haunt me. Early entry into the Brain Health program provides an opportunity to begin healing at a much earlier stage. An outstanding strength of the program is provided by volunteers. Members who have been in the program willingly mentor and support newer members. We're all in this together, and we support each other and learn together. Maine has a significant aging population. In fact, the largest one in the United States, and the significant prevalence of dementia. In my opinion, this program should be a model for other communities, and perhaps eventually for the entire state of Maine.
Just want to summarize, you all hopefully picked up the handout on your way in about the brain healthy lifestyle. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is something that everybody in this room can do. You don't have to be a member of our program, but if you care about your brain, and most of us do, as you've heard, we all work really hard at this because we don't want to lose our marbles. So sleep, healthy sleep, the best way to get good sleep is to do it go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time as much as possible, and try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Most of us in the program monitor our sleep with some measurement device. It might be a watch, it might be a pad under the bed, it might be a ring. There are lots of options, and we can help you pick one. Exercise about double what you're currently doing is kind of my rule of thumb, but certainly 30 minutes most days, and try to make a strength training, aerobics, flexibility, balance. They're all really important. Many of us exercise together. Many of us walk our dogs together. We dance together. When Dr. Teel and I were supposed to be working on these slides, you probably saw a few glitches. We were actually out dancing in Damariscotta last night. So dancing is a great form of exercise. The diet, we call it keto flex, but basically you reduce the amount of carbohydrates, you increase the amount of healthy fat like avocados, salmon, olive oil, olives, nuts, etc. Everything that you ate earlier, sampled earlier, and there's probably some you can grab on your way out, was brain healthy food. You cut back on sugar, you cut back on processed foods, and most of us do not eat American cow dairy because American cows have been genetically modified to produce more milk. And that genetic modification is not good for our brains. So we either do almond milk or coconut milk or goat's milk, or we buy A2 cow's milk and cheeses from Europe where they haven't genetically modified their cows. We do eat berries and organic vegetables of all colors, except, occasional corn on the cob, occasional sweet potatoes, but we don't eat white potatoes. We don't eat white pasta. We eat spaghetti squash or alternatives. The thing that Dr. Teel introduced to all of us, because he had a lot of experience with this in his own practice, is music. We try to listen to music for an hour or so a day, and in particular, we listen to music from kind of the most productive years in our lives, or the college years or teenage years, because that's what has been actually proven to make your brain work better. It reconnects synapses that hadn't been connected. And socializing and doing volunteer work and being purposeful in your life are all really important. So the fact that we operate as a group and we kind of cheer each other on is part of that. And then, as Dr. Teel said, we want to stimulate your brain in as many ways as you can. We recommend a program that was invented by Dr. Mercenich, who is that the right name? Who was the inventor of brain plasticity, and it's called Brain HQ, brainhq.com, and it has different sections for different areas of your brain to function them, to strengthen them. And one of the things about that program is it's very frustrating. BJ Dobson, sitting here in the front row, is our Brain HQ master. She plays it every single morning and is way up there in the charts in terms of all of her brain function. And but it's designed for you to fail. So your brain isn't going to make new pathways unless you fail at something at least 20% of the time. So you're working on these games and they speed them up or they make them more complicated and then you fail and then you have to keep trying. So it's frustrating, but it's good for you. So make sure as you think about brain stimulation, don't just do the same thing over and over again that you're good at, like crossword puzzles or Sudoku or whatever. Pick something that you're not good at and work on that. And anything that is involves your brain and your physical, so learning new dance steps, learning how to play a new instrument, anything like that, learning to play tennis if you haven't done that before, anything that involves brain-body connection is really important. And then number 9 was reduce stress. So all of us have too much stress in our lives, particularly in the summertime. We have all these visitors coming and we have family issues and we have to run around and get everything ready. But just remember that every time you feel frustrated or angry or stressed out, you can just notice that you're feeling that way and let those thoughts go and switch gears and take a walk, read a book, take a shower, do something to get rid of that stress, and that will keep your brain healthy. So these are all the things that anybody can do. So thank you all for sitting through our talk. And now let's have questions for Dr. Teel. Doug, you've got that mic. If you can turn that one on. Put your hands up and find you.
We see on television many ads for medications and so on for brain improvement that you have enlisted in your presentation. Is that conscious decision, or how to? And what is your opinion of those advertisements?
Sure. The question was, what about medications and advertisements about the benefit of medications? We have had a love-hate relationship with supplements for sure in our group. We have a group of individuals who have been, and I've been a proponent of it as well, to try to find the best supplements to make the most difference for one's brain. And it's very clear that some things like vitamin D, vitamin B12 are almost across the board beneficial, and many people are not getting enough of them. Those are very important for vitamin D is almost a hormone in the brain rather than just being something for your bones. There are also many things that have stood the test of time that are like fish oils or omega-3s, as some of you might know them that way, or turmeric as an anti-inflammatory medicine. So there are a number of supplements. And most recently, there's been quite a bit of discussion and research coming out of Asia, Taiwan in particular, where people are focusing on how do we reduce inflammation and the oxidative reactions that are part of damage from inflammation in our brain. And they are focusing on using things like glutathione. They're also focusing on, surprisingly, some off-label uses of medications. Metformin is one that comes to mind. You might have heard that name in reference to people on something for diabetes. So it has also been shown to be very, very helpful for cognitive function. And as we talked about earlier on glucose toxicity, you can see why. It improves glucose control for a lot of people, and even for non-diabetics, it probably has a good deal of benefit for the brain. The last bit of conversation on that is really a work in progress is that we have done a lot of looking in the last few months on other off-label uses of currently FDA-approved pharmaceuticals for some other reason to try to use them for brain health. And that's something that I think If we are late to the game and we're dealing with somebody who has quite advanced cognitive decline, there may be a reason to use a number of things as long as the side effects are minimal.
While we're waiting for the next question, anybody who's on Zoom, just use the chat and we will read your question out loud.
I was just wondering, where do you have to go to get this particular MRI, and does Medicare cover it?
Medicare was covering it, and we were very lucky to have a radiology suite in Brunswick at Cook's Corner, where we were able to get this for the last 5.5 or 6 years. Just a month or so ago, they decided to not renew their license for this particular test. So I've had to courageously buy my own license in order to keep doing this for our particular group. So your insurance generally will cover the MRI, but we're still working out whether we will have to charge you a couple $100 or something for the license. But it is something that at least now would allow me to be able to take a standard MRI of the brain done at any radiology suite in America. And as long as you can send us the disc, we should be able to process it to be able to do these particular things. So with every challenge, hopefully there's another opportunity to reach a few more people.
Hey, I guess my follow-up question to that is, as a summer resident who's only here 3 or 4 months, a year, would I be able to get this MRI and get it interpreted?
I don't see any reason why not.
Great, thank you very much.
Lots of summer people in our.
Thanks. Very good presentation. Thank you very much. I was curious about is volume always correlated with like performance or capacity, or because there's a density, isn't there a density packing of neurons and so on?
No. The question is volume, I think in a broader question, is volume always related to function? In a way that is, I wish we had a way to measure function more than just volume. And obviously, even though we're getting 100 numbers of every subsection of your brain, each one of those 100 subsections has 6 or so layers of cells, and we don't really know when you've got some atrophy, whether the atrophy is sparing part of that function and hitting another function quite hard. So even though we've got 100 numbers, I'd love to have 1,000 numbers that might be able to look at even more minute detail to try to answer those questions.
Can you tell us the difference between Alzheimer and dementia?
Very good question. The question was, is there a difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? I think many people tend to focus on the word Alzheimer's disease, and the word Alzheimer's disease was generally used for people who primarily had problems with memory and executive function. And dementia was everybody else that didn't quite fit, into that rubric. I've tended to stop using the word Alzheimer's disease at all because almost everybody's MRI is unique to themselves. And many of the people that have done research on this say that it really depends on which topographical subsections of your brain are most impaired in terms of what symptoms you have. So people whose Alzheimer's disease, for instance, is focused more on the occipital part or the back of their head rather than the front of their head could have a very different way that they present with their Alzheimer's disease. So I've tended to focus mostly on the fact of calling it cognitive decline and then trying to define which part of your brain is most impacted and which day-to-day activities are most interfered with. There is actually some science to that that said that a group in England did autopsies on people who, while they were alive, had high-quality neurology evaluations and were either told, as Elaine alluded to, that they had either Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia from strokes. And they found out on autopsies that they were wrong about 2/3 of the time, that the people that they thought had Alzheimer's disease had had lots of mini strokes, and the people that they thought had mini strokes had Alzheimer's disease. So our clinical sophistication to be able to tell the difference in many individuals has not been very good. Doug?
Thank you for a great presentation. I have a couple of diet questions. Do you think that organic milk and yogurt is also not beneficial if there are no hormones in the product? And the second question is, a friend of mine drinks powdered mushrooms for his brain. What do you think of that?
Well, welcome to our group. You know, we focus an awful lot and really a little bit too much a couple years ago versus where we are now as a group. But we're really trying to observe things in moderation. We're trying to not, we have a subsection of our group that is very, very precise and very, very disciplined. And then there are others that are not quite so precise and not quite as disciplined, you know, but I think the goal is primarily to focus people on being, eating healthy. And so it's an open question in some of the inflammatory cookbooks and things as to whether you consider tomato a pro-inflammatory or an anti-inflammatory vegetable. And I really would rather not go there. I'd rather have people just eat more vegetables and less carbs. The question about mushrooms is also very good. Obviously, lion's mane is a staple of many people's supplements for brain health, and many people have noticed an improvement with it. We have folks in our group asking about psilocybin and other mushroom products. And so the research is evolving, and we will continue to try to keep up with it as it happens.
What about organic milk and yogurt? What's your opinion of that?
I think it's what's important and probably more important every week and month is that knowing where your food comes from and having some connection. So many of the organic supplies come from farms that we know. And I think farm to table is a really good thing to get healthy food. Is that dodging your question too much?
I have a question. Could you address hearing loss? And also another thing that came up was gardening.
Sure. Hearing loss and gardening, not related. Initially, I thought we had it a bit mixed up with cause and effect. That I thought that hearing loss would make you miss more things, so you would seem like you were slower than you really were. Now I think that there is enough connection there that the hearing centers of the brain are an associated area of the cortex of the brain that is really quite vast. And so as people have atrophy of those association areas, it impacts their ability to hear and to understand what they're hearing. So I think it is more true than ever that hearing loss contributes and is an integral part of cognitive decline. Gardening. Gardening is a great form of exercise, and believe it or not, in many parts of the world, they've actually studied the impact of putting your hand in the dirt and working in the dirt and doing blood tests after that to see whether it improved the brain-derived neurotrophic factors that grow new brain cells, and the conclusions are overwhelmingly positive that it does. So a big applause for anybody focused on gardening, that there's a great connection between gardening and brain health in a positive way.
Great. We're going to stop there. Dr. Teel will be here. Let's give him a warm thank you. And please help yourself to remaining snacks on your way out. And we're inviting you to another party on September 19th at Mine Oyster. We have a Hats for Health party, which includes music and dancing and heavy hors d'oeuvres. And we hope you'll come join us to support the health center. Thank you all so much for coming.